The snow was coming down in thick, relentless sheets, coating the road and muting everything around me. I was behind the wheel, hauling cargo down an empty highway in the dead of night. The dashboard clock read 2:47 a.m., and my eyes were starting to burn from exhaustion. The neon glow of a rest stop sign appeared ahead, and I thought it might be a good place to pull over and catch a few hours of sleep. I took the exit and rolled into the deserted lot, the headlights barely cutting through the heavy snowfall. The rest stop looked as remote as they came, a small bathroom shack, a few picnic benches, and nothing else for miles. It was perfect. I parked my truck towards the far end of the lot, away from the bathroom lights, and leaned back in my seat. Just as my eyes were beginning to drift shut, I heard a faint rustle. My senses snapped to attention, and I peered into the darkness. At first, there was nothing but the falling snow, and then I saw it. Movement. A shadow quickly darted from behind the bathroom shack to a small sedan parked on the other side. Something about it didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way they moved, too quick and too quiet, like they were trying not to be seen. I sat still, listening. My breath misted in the cold air, and my hand went instinctively to the wrench I kept between the seats. I wasn't about to step out into an unknown situation, not without some kind of plan. Just then, I heard a thud followed by a muffled whisper. My eyes tracked the movement again, and that's when I realized there were more of them, two shadows this time slipping silently towards my truck. My heart rate spiked, a chill running through my body that had nothing to do with the cold. I locked the doors and ducked down, hoping I hadn't already been spotted. The shadows approached, and I caught a glimpse of one of them through the side mirror. A tall figure, face obscured by a hood, holding what looked like a crowbar. My mind raced. This was no coincidence. They were here for the truck. I could feel panic setting in, but I forced myself to focus. I needed a way out, and I needed it fast. I glanced towards the ignition, knowing I could try to start the engine, but the noise would draw them straight to me. They were right next to the cab now. I could hear their feet crunching on the snow, and then the handle on the passenger door rattled. I clenched the wrench tighter, my knuckles going white. The guy with the crowbar tried the door again, harder this time, and then whispered something to the other one. I could see them more clearly now. 3 of them, all wearing dark clothes, their faces hidden beneath scarves and hoods. They were talking in hushed voices, gesturing at the truck like it was already theirs. I had to act. The only way out was to make noise, to draw attention, scare them off. I leaned over, slamming my hand into the horn, the blaring sound tearing through the stillness of the night. The figures jumped back, startled, and I didn't waste a second. I turned the ignition, the engine roaring to life, and slammed the truck into reverse. One of them lunged towards the driver's side window, and I swung the wrench, connecting with a sickening thud. He fell back, and I floored it, the truck lurching backward before I spun the wheel, sending it skidding across the lot. I could see the others scrambling, trying to get to the sedan, but I wasn't going to stick around to see what they did next. The tires fought for traction as I sped towards the exit, my heart pounding in my ears. I barely made it back onto the highway, the truck swerving as the snow continued to fall, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. The adrenaline was still pumping through me, and I drove for miles, not daring to look back, until the glow of distant city lights finally appeared on the horizon. It wasn't until later, when I had finally found another rest stop, this one bustling with truckers and travelers, that I heard the news. A couple of truckers were talking near the coffee machine, their voices low but urgent. Yeah, that rest stop. It's been a crime scene for months now. Guys getting jumped, trucks stolen. They say a gang's been setting traps, leaving cars out there to make it look like someone needs help. My hands trembled as I poured myself a cup of coffee, the hot liquid spilling over the rim. I had barely escaped. If I'd hesitated, if I'd let Mike's voice in my head convince me to be the Good Samaritan this time, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have a story to tell, just another missing truck, another ghost on the highway. I left my truck behind, but I kept my life, and now Whenever I see a car pulled over on a lonely stretch of road, I keep driving. No matter what. Story 2. Ben hadn't planned on taking the shortcut. It wasn't a route you chose on a whim. But the storm was gnawing at his patience, and this lesser-used highway was his best chance to get ahead of the blizzard. It stretched for miles without a turn, slicing through nowhere, desolate and treacherous. He knew the warnings about this stretch, the rumors among truckers, but a seasoned driver like Ben didn't buy into that nonsense, and his CB radio wasn't spewing anything he hadn't heard before, just another night on the road, right? The sign for an isolated rest stop loomed into view. Ben's fingers were sore from gripping the wheel, and the idea of a quick break seemed like the right move. Pulling in, the place looked strange, eerily silent. The kind of quiet that made the hair on your neck stand up. The parking lot was dotted with half a dozen other trucks, engines cold, forming ghostly silhouettes in the storm's haze. There were no figures and no drivers milling about, no plumes of breath rising from idle smokers. He parked and turned off the engine, taking a moment to breathe in the silence. Ben stepped out, his boots crunching in the snow. There was a chill beyond the cold, something that settled deep in his gut as he made his way between the parked rigs. No voices, no music blaring from within the cabs, nothing but the hiss of the wind. The windows of each truck were dark, the cabs vacant. He knocked on a door, his fist echoing dully. No response. He knocked again. Still nothing. The entire rest stop felt abandoned, like a place left to decay. He passed one rig and then another, realizing each was more or less the same. Gear left scattered in disarray, food wrappers tossed aside, like whoever had been here didn't plan on going anywhere, or hadn't been given the chance. Then he saw it, a door ajar, hanging loosely. He pulled it open, half expecting some sick prank or someone to leap out. But what he found was worse. An untouched logbook, half a sandwich, the driver's jacket still slung over the seat. Whoever had been here had left fast. Too fast. And that's when he heard it, a metallic clanging from somewhere behind the rest stop building, faint but distinct in the stillness. Ben's instincts told him to get back in his truck and leave, but something else pulled at him, a curiosity, a sense of duty to his fellow drivers. He followed the noise around the building, past an old vending machine half buried in the snow, to a set of stairs leading to a basement door. It was cracked open, darkness yawning beyond it. The clanging came again, echoing up from below. He hesitated. There was something unmistakably wrong about this, the kind of wrong you only sensed after years on the road where every instinct was honed for survival. But there he was, his curiosity winning out. He pulled out his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom as he slowly descended the stairs. The basement was larger than he'd expected, the air damp and rank. It took his eyes a moment to adjust, but he could make out shapes, figures, people. Ben's stomach twisted as he realized what he was seeing. Men, truckers like himself, huddled together, wrists bound, eyes hollow. They looked up at him, their expressions a mix of fear and desperation. A heavy clang echoed again, and Ben's flashlight swept over to where the noise was coming from. A barred door, a padlock hanging loosely. Someone was trying to get out. "Hey!" Ben called, his voice rough in the cold air. One of the men, his face gaunt, whispered back, "They're watching us. Don't let them see you!" Ben's pulse quickened, the flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. He didn't know who they were, but the fear in the man's eyes told him all he needed to know. This wasn't just some freak accident. This was a trap, a deliberate setup, and he'd walked right into it. He backed away, his mind racing, trying to figure out how to get these guys out. But then he heard it, footsteps from above, slow and deliberate. Ben's breath caught as he realized there was no way out but the way he'd come in. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open, and Ben quickly turned off his flashlight, pressing himself against the damp wall, trying to blend into the shadows. He could hear them now. Voices, low and steady, discussing something he couldn't quite make out. Then a laugh, cold and detached. The kind of laugh that sent a shiver straight through to his bones. Ben knew he had to think fast. He had to get out, warn someone, do something. He inched along the wall, barely daring to breathe. His eyes scanned the room, looking for anything. A weapon, a key, something to give him an edge. But all he saw were the faces of the other drivers, eyes wide, silently pleading. His foot brushed against something metal, a tire iron half buried in the grime. He reached down, fingers closing around the cold steel just as a flashlight beam swept across the basement. Ben ducked, holding his breath, praying whoever it was wouldn't see him. The light lingered, sweeping slowly over the terrified faces of the drivers, then moved on. Ben's heart pounded in his ears, each second feeling like an eternity. He had to do something. And fast. He turned, catching the eye of the gaunt man who had warned him. The man nodded subtly towards a corner of the room, where a rusted vent cover lay slightly ajar. Ben understood immediately. It was their only shot. Keeping low, he moved towards the vent, prying it open just enough to slip through. He motioned for the others to follow, and one by one they crawled through, silent as shadows. The vent was tight, the air thick and suffocating. But Ben pushed forward, the sound of footsteps echoing somewhere behind them, growing louder. Finally, the vent opened up, spilling them out into the cold night air behind the rest stop. Ben helped the others out, his eyes scanning the lot for any sign of movement. They had to move, now. He led them towards his truck, keeping low, the snow crunching beneath their hurried steps. The trucks that had seemed abandoned now loomed like silent witnesses, their cabins dark and empty. Ben knew they weren't safe yet, not by a long shot. He got the men into his cab, the engine roaring to life, tires spinning in the thick snow as he pulled away, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. In the distance, he could see figures emerging from the rest stop, their outlines barely visible in the storm, but he didn't wait to see more. He floored it, the truck barreling down the icy road away from that cursed place. No one spoke as they drove, the silence heavy with what they'd just escaped. Ben's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to look back. The storm raged on, but he didn't care. They were out, and that was all that mattered. Whatever was happening at that rest stop, whoever those people were, Ben knew one thing for sure. He would never take this shortcut again, and he would make damn sure no one else did either. Story 3. The rest stop had always been one of those places on the map where time seemed to forget about you. I didn't like stopping there, but after 8 hours of straight driving and too much caffeine buzzing through my system, I needed a quick break. It was the kind of pit stop that looked perfectly fine on the outside. A lone building with a gas station canopy, bathroom doors just off to the side, and one lonesome soda machine humming in the corner. Everything seemed to whisper, "Nothing to see here, just move along." I stepped out of my rig, stretching and hearing the crackle in my back, a constant reminder that trucker life doesn't exactly come with comfort. Snow was beginning to come down lightly, the flakes catching the headlights and turning into small bursts of glitter. My tires crunched over the asphalt as I made my way toward the restroom. Nothing particularly strange stood out, just the occasional creaking sound coming from the old canopy swaying in the wind. The bathroom door hanging open a bit too far as though it had given up trying to stay closed. But the atmosphere, it felt different tonight, thicker maybe. It's a feeling you only get when something's out of place, but your brain hasn't figured out what yet. I paused for a moment, my eyes narrowing as I stared towards the darkened bathrooms. Something was off. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, a sense that the place was occupied, though I couldn't see anyone. I stood there, my eyes flicking around the empty lot, waiting, like some primal part of me was screaming to turn back. That's when I heard the clicking. It was rhythmic, faint, almost like the sound of a camera's shutter. I stepped closer to the building, hesitating by the door. Leaning in, I peered into the darkness, and sure enough, that strange sound was coming from inside the restroom. My hand froze halfway to the handle. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, but as they did, the scene unfurled like a nightmare. Tucked in the upper corner, practically invisible against the grimy wall, was the smallest red LED light. My heart sank. A hidden camera. It wasn't just one. There were others too, planted in the shadows where they wouldn't be noticed unless you were looking for them. The kind of cameras people use when they want to see something they shouldn't. My pulse hammered in my ears as I slowly pulled away from the door. The rest stop was supposed to be empty, so who was watching? I backed up until I hit the soda machine, my eyes scanning the area. The wind picked up, rustling the trees beyond the perimeter of the lights, and I swore I saw movement. I fumbled for my keys, every instinct telling me to get the hell out of there. My boots scraped on the asphalt, a sharp noise that echoed too loudly, and my rig loomed in the corner of my vision, almost within reach. That's when I saw it, a glint in the distance, the outline of a shadowed house beyond the tree line, dark except for the dim flicker of a television screen visible through the window. Something clicked inside me. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Whoever owned that house was watching. They were watching the rest stop. I climbed into my rig and started the engine, the sound rumbling through the empty night. I drove off, my tires spinning over the slush, and as the rest stop disappeared in the rear view, I couldn't help but notice a silhouette standing by the tree line, watching me leave. The radio crackled to life as I sped away. Some local channel DJ talking about the weather, the words fading in and out as I drove further from the signal. My breath came in short gasps, the feeling of eyes boring into the back of my head still vivid. I knew there was something more to it, some angle that wasn't just about perverts planting cameras for kicks. That house, those hidden cameras, there was something organized here. Something more sinister than I wanted to stick around to figure out. It wasn't until a week later, at a trucker's diner off Highway 34, that I found out the truth. I overheard a few truckers talking, their voices hushed as if what they had to say could invite trouble. They talked about the same rest stop, the strange cameras, and men being blackmailed. One of the older guys looked over his shoulder before leaning in. They lure truckers in, get footage on them, then either you pay up or they come for you. He tapped his temple knowingly, his face grim. Plenty don't make it out. My blood ran cold. I thought about that silhouette, about how long I might have been watched without even knowing. I still remember the way my fingers shook as I held my cup of coffee that morning, my mind drifting back to the hidden camera and the house by the tree line. I left that diner knowing I'd dodged a bullet. But it still eats at me, the thought that there are more places out there, just like that one. Places that look ordinary, but if you take a moment to listen, if you catch a glimpse out of the corner of your eye, you'll see it. You'll hear the clicking, the faint hum of something that shouldn't be there. And if you're lucky, you'll make it out before they notice you've noticed them.